Good morning. My name is Buck Malick. I'm the chair of the St. Croix County Zoning Board of Adjustment. Today is Wednesday, April 24th of 2024, and it's 8:30 a.m. According to the clock on the wall. We're in the room 1284 of the Government Center in Hudson, the county seat. This is the time and the place that were published for this month's meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So I'm calling the meeting to order. I'll ask the other members of the Board of Adjustment and the members of the Community Development Department who are here and expecting to speak today to sign in or talk in on their microphones, and we'll make sure the equipment works and set up the sound levels and so on. Starting with you, Mr. Peterson.
Dave Peterson, citizen member, town of Kinnickinnick.
Joe Miller, citizen member, town of Hammond.
Greg Telejohn, County Supervisor, District 14, representing Aaron Prairie, a little bit of Warren and Richmond Township.
Dave Nickham, town of Baldwin, citizen member.
Very good. We have Jason Cheezit working on the microphone system at the moment, and so on. And Mike is also working on something somewhere. So I guess the technology is slowing our start here.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Sorry.
Thank you. One thing we can do is we can approve the minutes of the, I should make the announcement about publication. I believe this meeting to have been properly noticed and published in the newspapers according to the requirements of the state statutes and the county ordinances. But if anybody has reason to think that there is a defect in the publication, I'd like you to speak now so that we can address any perceived problems with our publication of notice. Seeing none, I'll take that to be okay, as it has been every single meeting I've been at in the last 17 years, but we ask. Now for the approval of the minutes. Board members, you were provided a draft. If you have any edits to the minutes, please speak now. I'm not seeing any, therefore they will be deemed to be approved. Thank you, Mrs. Julie's off working on something also.
Yes, Mr. Chair, she went and got Mike Wozniak, so we'll just need a couple minutes here to get this powered up so that we can proceed with the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cheezit. Are you making the presentation on the first matter, the TAMIC matter?
And that would be Mike Wozniak.
Okay. We don't have any lights on the screen right here on our side. Will you? Thanks, gee. Great. For those of you who are present and not familiar with our process, I ask you that before you speak, by speaking at the place that Mr. Cheezit is there, into that microphone, before you speak, please sign in on the form that's over there by the door. When you sign that, you take an oath that your testimony will be true, and that saves us a smidgen of time having to swear in each one of you individually. Also, if you write reasonably legibly, we'll have a ghost of a chance of getting your name spelled right in our written records, both of which are desirable features. Our process is typically that we'll proceed through the cases today. We have 5 of them in the order in which they were published. As a general matter, if you've got other work to do and you wish to step out of the room You do so at your own peril, of course, but it ordinarily takes us a half hour or more for each file. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's the order of magnitude of it, at least. Our process is that first the CDD staff gives a staff report, a summary. It'll almost certainly follow the pattern that was made available through the website of the county, the same documents, except for any that arrived at the last minute within the last couple of days. The same documents that are found on the website, they'll be going through here. It'll describe the application. It'll describe the standards that the board must follow. It may make a suggestion for the way the board ought to make the decision, and that'll be the staff report. And the board may dialogue with the staff member who's presenting it. Then I'll call on anybody in the room who wants to speak in favor of the application. Sometimes the applicants, sometimes they have lawyers or engineers or other sort of experts or any kind of testimony that they want to put into the record, possibly new exhibits. And the board may dialogue with those people. Then I'll call on people who are opposed to the application, and we'll go through the same process. And lastly, I'll call for anybody in the room who isn't necessarily for nor against, but has some point of view or some evidence to offer that they think will help the board make a better decision. So that'd be our process. Sometimes after the presentation and all this back and forth with the witnesses, the board makes a decision right then and there. I might close the hearing, for instance, and the board proceeds to make a motion and adopt that motion. Other times, the board may determine that they need more evidence. They might decide that it's not appropriate to make a decision today, that we will set it ahead to a future date for the decision. Or sometimes we may decide that we should run through one or more of the cases and have that process of taking in the evidence all behind us before we take the time to start deliberating and making our actual decision. Today we've got a fairly large group of people in the room. It looks like we've got 13 of you here. And some of you, I'm sure, are anxious to get out of here and get on with your normal lives. And we're respectful of that. And that may influence our decision whether to try to deliberate and make a decision right after the presentation or hear all the presentations and then allow you to leave if you wish to do so. Are you ready, Mr. Wozniak, to make the first presentation?
Yes.
All right, floor is yours.
I'm ready. Very good. First on the agenda is a renewal request for a non-metallic mining permit applied for as CP 2024-004. This is from TAMIC LLC, and I'll note that, again, this is a renewal for a site in the town of Richmond, and the parcels involved have been actively mined since the 1950s, and I would note that notice has been provided for this, for a public hearing, and surrounding property owners notified as well. The site address 1170 County Road G, and I'll note that the property includes the site includes property both in an R1 and I2 districts under the county zoning. The request is to renew the CUP for non-metallic mining operation pursuant to section 15.370 of the county zoning ordinance and requirements of the county's non-metallic mining ordinance and mine basically as they apply to the site. Included with your packet materials for the staff report and the application submitted from TAMIC. Usually these renewals are fairly straightforward if there aren't any changes, and there are not any changes proposed with this operation. I've included on this slide a few highlights about the site background. Again, it's been in operation since the 50s. It's been under a renewal every 5 years since the county established that practice back in 2004. And I'll note the existing concrete plant, asphalt plant, and lab are zoned I2 in the I2 industrial district, whereas the rest of the site is in the R1 residential district. These uses have already received appropriate permits and approvals under county zoning. There's an existing 25-foot high berm surrounding the perimeter of the property. It's been maintained along the 100-foot setback from the property lines, and any changes to the reclamation plan will be reviewed by the staff and regulatory authority for under our regulatory authority for non-metallic mining reclamation. And at this time, no changes are proposed. We note the last bullet item on this slide: appropriate financial assurance for reclamation costs of existing open acreage and a reclamation plan are on file for this mining site. The current financial assurance bond is noted here as $1,927,866. Just a little more background here. I reference the site's internally drained, no mining below groundwater is proposed, and a WPDES general permit for non-metallic mining was approved by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and is on file. The applicant proposes to keep the same hours of operation as noted, and the mine, I would note the mine is in compliance with conditions from the 2019 conditional use permit renewal. There are no complaints on record for this site since the last renewal. Just a reminder of a visual of the site, and noted on here is a 100-foot setback and screening berm called out on this site map. Just some visuals of the site with photographs. We haven't received any comments from Town of Richmond. And I would note that Kevin Graybo on our staff, who had a commitment, is not able to be at the meeting today, but he did have a little dialogue with the City of New Richmond on just a couple questions. They don't have any issues and are supportive of the renewal. And we haven't received any comments from the DNR on this. This slide is our customary. This is the criteria that you have to consider when you're considering a CUP. The board is familiar with, and I'm I'm just going to, I did include a draft of a decision document that copies, I think, were left for you. Mr. Chair, do you have one? I make sure. I'll just close and before you open hearing is we think this is we reference in some findings and that basically note some of the existing provisions for the existing permit, and feel this it would be consistent to for the board to act to approve this renewal of the CUP, but I'll leave it to you to carry on with the hearing and any comments before you conclude what your decision is.
Thank you, Mr. Wozniak. Board members, do you have any questions for Mike? No? Anybody in the room want to speak in favor of this? Mrs. Anderson, do you wish to address us? Good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Candy Anderson. I'm with Milestone Materials, and Mike did a good job of summarizing our request. We are just asking for a standard 5-year renewal with no changes. I did want to add that we did go before the Town of Richmond Plan Commission and the Richmond Town Board and received recommendations for approval from both of them, and I do have copies of their minutes if that would be helpful.
That would be great. You give that to Mr. Wozniak, please, and we'll call that the next exhibit number in the list. I don't think the board needs to see it. It presumably was accurately summarized by Mrs. Anderson. It's a decision in favor or recommending that we approve. Anything else you'd like to say?
I don't have anything to add other than what Mike summarized, since there are no changes, but I would be glad to try to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Board members, do you have questions for Mrs. Anderson? Yeah. I guess all of us have been involved at least twice before, and in my case, 3, I guess. You know, that site is one of the few in the county that has a high berm around it, nearly 25 feet on some of the sides. And I've noticed that over the years, the trees that were planted on the top of it don't always survive. And I've often thought to myself, I'd like to have an opportunity to ask Mrs. Anderson whether those trees are a good idea, how much difficulty it is keeping them alive, is it worth it, do they buffer sound in a meaningful way, do they trap dust, do they reduce winds down in the pit in a way that's helpful to the operation? Do you have any thoughts at all that you want to tell us about that?
Well, I don't have any scientific evidence, I guess, for any of it, but I do think that they are aesthetically pleasing. They do also help screen sound. We do monitor the trees. We don't always get out there to maintenance them right away or anything like that, but I believe that they are beneficial. As far as making them a standard requirement for the county, I think it's got to be on a site-by-site basis. When we first started permitting that site, we recognized that there was going to be a lot of residential activity surrounding the site, which was the reason for that berm and those trees. So I think they help, and I think they look nice. But that's my own opinion.
Sure, good. Of course, it's somewhat difficult to establish trees on a hill like that,
Yes.
built from fill and so on. I can imagine some difficulty getting up there to water them. And
Yes.
I've been involved in situations of public plantings of trees. So when we require trees atop the berm, we're asking a fairly significant commitment from the applicant to keep them watered, at least for the first year until they're established. What's your thought about conifers versus deciduous trees?
I think conifers grow faster and are a little less maintenance, but you were exactly right, Buck. The watering of them is the hardest part, and we've run into that at other sites also where to establish an irrigation system on a berm of trees is almost impossible. Some sites we've done bushes. It just kind of depends on the site and the soil that we're working with, but I believe that conifers grow a little faster, so if you're trying to get a quicker screen, that those work better. The other thing you have to kind of weigh in too is for certain berms, if you put trees on, someday you might have to take that berm and use it in your reclamation, so then all of a sudden you've got these 40-foot tall trees on there. So it's really takes a lot of planning and thinking about, is that a good spot to have trees on that berm? The deciduous trees are a little bit more maintenance as far as growing and pruning and that sort of thing. So there's a little more work involved with that. And the other thing about trees too is if they're meant for screening and all of a sudden they get 30 feet tall or 20 feet tall, well then you've got from the ground to where the vegetation
branch.
starts, and then you're looking right in to what you were trying to screen when they were littler, if that makes sense.
When you use bushes, what do you typically use? Red cedar because it's so common around here, or do you use lead plant because it's a native, or what works?
A lot
if
of
you use
times I'll
bushes?
rely on a landscape company, depending on the site. I think there was one, we did some different kind of lilacs, but, lot smaller scale. So I didn't do very well in forestry at River Falls in college, so I usually have to call an expert to help me if we run into a situation.
Don't get carried away with the humility here. We know you're an expert. All right, board members, any questions? No. All right, thank you. Stand by, please. Anybody else that you wanted to have speak in favor of the application, or anybody in the room who wants to speak in favor of this application? How about opposition? Is anybody opposed to this application? Got something they want us to hear? Neither for nor against, but point of view to present to the board about this application? If not, I'll soon be closing the hearing and given the fact that it doesn't seem to be controversial today, we'll probably proceed right ahead to a decision. One last time? No? Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Nothing else from you, Mr. Wozniak or Mr. Cheezit? You've given us, actually what here is essentially the typical letter I would sign for a decision.
Yes. Excuse us, we got a little bit of a hybrid. We had different staff people working on things this time. We've been very busy in the office, so you're going to have a couple of these that look like the decision document you would sign, and others that are just like the document that says findings of fact, conclusions of law, and staff recommendation.
Yeah, right.
But bear with us on that. The material in there is what we're advising you to consider in your action.
Well, even though we've only been at it for 23 minutes, board members, I'm inclined to close the hearing. I'm not hearing from any of you that anybody's raising any points of contention, and from that I'm inferring that you're probably ready to make a decision, and it would probably be a favorable decision. So, 8:54, closing the hearing, Mrs. Peterson. Board members, what is your pleasure?
I guess I'd move that we approve the conditional use permit as presented by staff.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Mr. Telejohn seconds it. Any discussion? All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's unanimously approved. Thank you for your complete application. I'll sign it right now and give it to Mr. Wozniak, and he can do whatever he does with these things. And actually, Actually, I'll borrow somebody else's and sign it, and we can hand one to Mrs. Anderson right now, and she can go back to the office and declare victory. Yeah, yeah, you have our permission.
Nice try.
For whatever that's worth.
Boss is still here, so.
There you go. There you go. I should apologize to the rest of you in the room for our jocularity and so on. Believe me, we do take these cases seriously, and everybody is treated equally. We work very hard at that so that any applicant will get the same decision from us, no matter their age or color or gender or what they're wearing or any other factor. Mr. Cheezit, are you presenting the Duzick matter?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to recuse myself from this application. He's my next-door neighbor. As a town board member, I discussed this application with the town chairman, and he elected not to bring it up at a town meeting because there was no issues that he saw that were necessary to be discussed.
Which is sort of like approval, huh?
Yes.
Okay, and you concurred in that, I take it?
Yes.
And therefore you kind of feel that you wouldn't very well be able to tell your neighbor no.
That's
You're
correct.
biased, in other words, yeah. Okay, that's understood. Do you want to sit in the room and watch?
Yeah, I can do that.
It's whatever you choose to do.
Yeah. And when the Nashville one comes up, I've got to recuse myself from that one also.
Oh, okay, how's that? Are you, why don't you, well, you'll make your statement
Yeah.
about that one when we get to it.
Right.
Okay. 77 to 103.
Sure, yeah. Find that staff report here.
Well, we still have a quorum. We have 4, so more than we need. What have you got here? Here, staff report?
Form document. This is the sort of draft conclusions of law and staff recommendation.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Kay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application is for Nicholas and Carrie Dusick. The property is located at 1591 70th Avenue in Roberts. The property is further described as Lot 1 of CSM 25-5800, located in Section 31, Town 29 North, Range 17 West in the town of Hammond. The Dusicks are requesting a conditional use permit to operate a major home occupation to sell beef and other produce items from an accessory structure on the property. This staff report was drafted by Kelly Becker, our land use planner. The property is 8.21 acres in size, and its current zoning is R2. The property is generally flat. The total property owned by the Dusicks comprises of 2 lots. Lot 1 where the buildings are, and then a bigger outlot parcel that surrounds the existing property with the buildings. So the current accessory building is 3,456 square feet, and they're proposing to use 500 square feet of that existing building for the proposed business and operations, to have an office and some freezers. So up here on the map right now, you can see the outline of their property that they own. And there is a housing development just to the north of 70th Avenue here. That's where they expect some of their customers or guests to come from. So this is the proposed map and the existing buildings on the property. You can see the house is over on the west side, away from County Road J, and then this new building that would have that 500 square foot office and retail space. Parking would be on the property immediately in front of the building. There would be no sanitary facilities in the building for any guest or for the operators. This next diagram, as part of their application, was to take and show where that home office beef storage would be within that building. So then when we consider the criteria in the ordinance in order to grant a conditional use permit, we have to take and evaluate the impact of the conditional use request on the enjoyment and value of the surrounding properties. And we expect no impact to the area as their hours are limited and vehicles will not be parking on the road. The compatibility of the home-based business is compatible with the surrounding area because there is a lot of farm and rural character in this area, and the people that would be purchasing the products would be probably neighbors close to their property. And they're trying to promote farming and allowing them to buy directly from the farmer. And they will apply for a public health license and make sure that all of the beef is approved by the USDA for sale. And then to ensure that it's not going to be a problem for the neighbors by dust, smoke, odor, or other factors. They are close to many neighbors, but they do have that existing outlot that surrounds their property too, which will not be used for any dwellings. And their proposed hours are Thursday, 5 to 8 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to noon. And there will be no employees other than the owners. So here's the ordinance text that talks about a major home occupation, and they do meet all the requirements in the ordinance because the 500 square feet for an outbuilding is right here in the ordinance. The shed is greater than 100 feet from any neighboring household, so that standard is met. There's not going to be any employees besides the people that live on the property, Nick and Carrie. And, sorry, this is touchy. Beef and farm products will be intended to be sold from the property and from surrounding producers. They wanted to make sure that was clear. And so that's what I've got, Mr. Chair and the board.
Questions, board members? My only concern, this appears utterly non-controversial, but my only concern is growth of the business and the foot in the door aspect of allowing them to sell products that are not produced on their own farm. And I'm thinking that there are two things that sort of frame that from this becoming a mini fleet farm in the future. The one is the very limited hours of retail operation, just 2 days and parts of those days when products will be delivered to customers, if I understand it. And the second is that, if I understand this right, the staff is recommending that the whole operation is contained within the 500 square feet. In other words, there would not be pumpkins stored outside or in other parts of the buildings or any other products for sale except within the 500 square feet. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are correct, Mr. Chair. The only thing I believe the applicants want to do is they want to be able to take and sell some products that are not produced directly on their farm, but would be ag-related products. So maybe some eggs from somebody that may have a few birds. Maybe they would like to sell some maple syrup, but it'll be all ag-based products from the area. But it will be limited to within that building, within those hours, and within them as being the only employees,
And within the 500 square feet?
and within the 500 square feet.
So the shelves and whatever to store those eggs and et cetera will be all confined within the 500 square feet?
Correct.
All right, well, I don't want to set a precedent here that's going to be problematic for other applications in the future, but it seems to me with those restrictions, there should be no problem.
Okay.
Board members, anything, am I getting, too restrictive about this? No, we're apparently giving them everything they're asking for, but recognizing that it is in one sense an approval and in another sense a restriction. Mr. Wozniak?
Mr. Chair and board members, I just wanted to mention, other than the reflection on this from Mr. Miller, before you got into discussion of the item, we haven't heard any comments from the surrounding property owners that were notified on this. The applicants have indicated to us that a lot of those neighbors, there's a subdivision nearby, are their customers.
Yeah, and
So-
that's great. That's great. Is there anybody else in the room who wants to speak in favor of this application? Anybody want to speak in opposition to this application? Anybody just want to speak about this application? Doesn't look controversial to me. It appears that the staff recommendation is a pretty good way to go here, well within our authority to grant this. And with the restrictions that are built into it, it should not become a problem for future neighbors. So, yeah, okay, I don't see any hands raised or people bouncing up and down. So it's only 9:07, but I'm going to close the hearing. And I think on this one too, we might be able to move right ahead to a decision. So, Ms. Peterson, 9:07 for closing the hearing. And board members, are you ready to make a motion?
I make a motion, we approve this conditional use permit.
I'll second.
Well, I'm gratified that I read your body language correctly. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. There we have it. Do you have a document I can sign for this one too, Mr. Wozniak? No, not quite. Well, we'll get to it in a day or two.
We don't have it set up as actually, I do, but I don't have it with me at the moment.
All right, I'll try to remember not to rush out of the building before I sign it. Are we ready for the Netchville application then?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Am I pronouncing that correctly? Or is it Neckville? Netchville.
Nashville.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I've got to recuse myself from this application. I have a employment relationship with just about every member of the family, so.
Oh, hey, great. Yeah, I thought you were retired though, Mr. Miller.
I claim to be.
Okay. All right, we'll accept your recusal for this matter, and assuming that you're not going to be standing back there and clapping your hands or holding thumbs up or thumbs down, we'll have you stay in the room.
Okay.
Are you presenting this one, Mr. Kazeth?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Jesus?
All right. So Henry Netchville requests a conditional use permit for concrete recycling and landscape product storage in a property that is zoned R1 under section 15.370 of the St. Croix County zoning ordinance. The property is further described as the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 24, Town 29 North, Range 18 West in the town of Warren, located at 1432 County Road TT, and the the Development Department has published a proper Class 2 hearing notice prior to today. So this is an existing non-metallic mining site, and the applicant is wishing to haul in old concrete, crush it on site, and then haul it back out as a product. They're also wanting to be able to do some composting of tree parts, like stumps and the trees themselves. Go downstairs. So up here on the screen is a map of the existing pit. So County Road TT is down here at the bottom of the screen, and this is the active mining area right in this area. Actually extends up to the north here a little bit too. So this area right in the middle, there is a creek that runs on the west side of the existing mine, but there is a significant berm that separates the two. So here's kind of that north end of that pit area that I showed. So they're proposing the composted material up here on the very north end of the pit, then some tree parts, and that just on the south side of the drive there. Then the concrete being stacked and then crushed would be over here, a little bit on the east side. And then just some general rocks in the middle and topsoil farther to the south towards County Road TT.
While you're on that map, does this one have any, I don't remember, a berm along its eastern edge to separate it from that apparently field over there on the east?
And that does not. I got some pictures farther down here of the site.
Does the applicant own the land to the east also?
No, but he does own the 40 acres to the north.
Uh-huh.
So here you can see how the property is zoned. So it is pretty much mainly farm field directly to the east, but there is some household buildings and stuff in the very far southeast corner of that next adjoining parcel. The applicant does own the 40 right to the north here as well, so it's a total of 80 acres, but the mining is only on the south 40. This area, I should point out, is zoned floodplain, Zone A. And what a Zone A floodplain means is that that area has not been studied to determine whether or not it's floodway or flood fringe. And so it's been that way for a long time. We all know that we have FEMA maps that have a significant amount of error, and eventually those will be corrected to really narrow in. But again, the berm along the existing creek here, we believe would keep any flood waters from flowing into the pit. So I've kind of went over this map already, showing where the tree parts and the compost areas would be and where the concrete would be stockpiled. There is an internal pond kind of in the middle.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yes.
I know this pit has been flooded at times, but not recently.
Okay.
How does that work with the compost and the tree?
Well, so the applicant also brought up about having snow removed from like city, village streets brought to this site. So we had concerns about the salt and the contamination of that salt, what that might be in a floodplain area. So staff advised that that probably wouldn't be a good thing to be hauled into this pit. As far as the compost and stuff, you can see, you'll have to wait, Henry, and then, so, yep, yep, afterwards, so. There is a lot of trees already on the property, so I don't know, I mean, if there would be enough velocity of the flood in this area to move any of those tree parts around or those stumps around. I guess that could be a concern of the board.
Normally, that internal drainage thing there is internally drained, doesn't outflow, right? But the concern in flooding conditions is that it would get to a high enough level that it would both enter and exit to the nearby stream. Is that the point that I should be understanding?
I believe that's the point that Mr. Nickum brought up. Yep.
I see.
So the applicant can maybe provide more background as far as the history of it. But
What
that
do we
was-
know about surrounding wells, if anything? Are they recharged by water that infiltrates from from the site?
I did not go into that much depth.
We don't know
So,
yet.
yep.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'd just add that that berm that runs north-south that separates what I would say the bigger pond, the main channel,
Yeah.
from the active part of the site where this activity being proposed today would occur, and where the mining occurs as well. That berm would really serve to not only contain, it's not that floodwaters couldn't fill up the low-lying area where the concrete work or recycling of the wood, the trees or the mining occurs, but it would separate it in terms of sediment finding its way into the main channel, or debris, if you think about composted items. I think it would work pretty well for that from what I could see by site visit.
Do you have a topo map of that from which we could make a calculation or a scientific judgment that there would not be outflow of particulates that they would have settle out?
We might have to examine that, the topo close and see if our current LiDAR, I think there's been some work to enhance that berm, that maybe it's a little different than what it was the last time our topo was generated.
Yeah.
A little more complete, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I know the pit has not been flooded recently, but I know years ago it did, and I don't know what's changed. Even the field across the road on the south side of Double T would be covered with water, but I don't think it's a flowing thing. I think it's, it's a dry run, so it doesn't flow like a creek, but
Well, the general direction of development in our county is as there are more roofs and more driveways, we have more flooding because there are fewer places for water to soak in, The trend is generally not the opposite way, to reduce the flooding during high water events and melt and so on. Go ahead, Mr. Kay.
Okay.
Is this just down the street from your church?
Okay, so the total application request is to be able to haul in concrete. Then they would be also hauling in the wood tree parts to compost. The storage of landscape products like sand, rock, and topsoil. The crushing of the concrete that they haul in by a portable crushing plan with up to 5,000 cubic yards piled up at a time. The grinding of the tree parts up to 5,000 cubic yards piled at a time on site. And the hours of operation are proposed to be Monday through Friday from 6:30 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they anticipate the truck traffic could be up to 20 trips per day.
Those are the same hours that have been in effect for years, aren't they, or are they expanding?
I believe that they're currently in effect.
Yeah,
Yep.
all right. I noticed that I'm having a hard time visualizing what 5,000 cubic yards is, except that it's 500 10-yard dump trucks. I noted that in the equipment list, there was a 25-foot conveyor. I think I remember that correctly. So I take it that's how high the top of the, well, I'll ask Mr. Netchville when he gets here, but I'm assuming that'll be the top of the pile. So we have the potential here, if this permit is granted the way it is applied, of two piles that are 25 feet high.
Okay.
All right.
Question?
Yes.
Did Highway have a look at this? That Double T is getting very busy there, so I'm just curious if there.
And that, so staff is actually proposing in that Highway would have to take and sign off on a conditional approval as one of the conditions on the request. So, yep.
Is Highway likely to require a turn lane to be added?
I can't speak for Highway on that one, so.
Well, that would be one of the things they would consider on a high-traffic road, isn't it? Okay.
I'd note, Mr. Chair and the board, I did speak briefly with the applicant about the access issue, and Mr. Nashville did indicate that the applicants, that their intent is to pave partially into the site from the county road, edge of the county road. It's currently not paved, and so they would need to coordinate with and probably get a driveway access permit. I mean, they have an approved access for the mining operation, but any change to it would have to be coordinated with Highway.
But that may simply be the kind of strip that drops the mud from getting onto the highway, rather than facilitating ingress and egress and passing traffic. Yeah, a little different issues from a turn lane.
Yeah, understood. I mean, if they, based on change of use, Highway could determine something like a turn lane would be necessary for it because of change of use. I'm not assuming what they'll conclude, but the applicant will need to coordinate with them. We'll have Highway contact the applicant is what our intent is here.
So that existing access is shown up here on the photo on the left-hand side. So this area here would be what Chairman Malik mentioned about a tracking pad would be paved here, but that still could leave Highway to require a turn lane or a bypass lane. So I'm going to back up now a couple pages to go through the applicant's proposal. So the impact of this change in use, and that would be that the area is already approved as a non-metallic mining site. The dust will be controlled by the use of water. The existing tree cover will dampen the noise, and the trees will block the view of some of the piles. And the site is surrounded by ag land on all sides.
That's the zoning of it, is it?
And that,
Is
well,
it
the
ag?
property's actually zoned R1, but the use of the land is tilled farmland, so, yep.
I see. So you could have an application for a subdivision any day.
So it could be up to 4 lots per 40. So here is the zoning map right here, where it shows everything around it, at least within a quarter of a mile, is all zoned the same way. So on the left here.
Or with a major, it could be more dense, couldn't it?
And that, so if they rezoned it from R1 to R2, then yes, and that it could be a major plat and it could be down to the 2 acre average.
Thanks.
So the applicant is proposing only doing the concrete crushing between 2 and 4 weeks out of the year. So at those times, there would be more noise, vibration, and potential dust. But the remaining part of the year, it would just be hauling in and hauling out. And compost would be hauled in all year long. The applicant states that the noise and dust will be decreased or not a problem because of the existing berms and tree cover that's on site, and that they will help with the dust by spraying water on the piles and access roads. Here's a picture of the large pond on the west side of the pit. A lot of smaller tree cover, I don't know, probably box elders it looks like. This is a photograph of the proposed storage for the processing of concrete, tree stumps, and tree parts. So this would be towards the north end of the pit. The area here on the right is the area that they would have for storage of the rock and topsoil. This would be looking east. So you can see the tree cover that is going to the east side. Here's that smaller pond, and that on the east side of the berm that the pit is around, right here. And another picture of the rock topsoil area just a little bit farther to the north. Okay. They are proposing to have no on-site lighting, and otherwise I think we've pretty much covered all of that slide. The DNR has not offered any comments on this. This is a CUP request, and the town of Warren has not provided any specific comments on it either. The applicant would be required to obtain any stormwater permits from the DNR. So, the Board of Adjustment, and that has the standard conditions in the ordinance to consider. And that's the end of our staff report.
I missed it on the site restoration bond. Have you got a bond in place already for
Yes.
site restoration?
The applicant is current with the financial assurance and with their plan. Yep, to
Okay.
reclaim the site.
And
One of the things that our staff brought up to my attention is that there's been a lot of disturbance out there, and there's probably some of the area that could be seeded and that to stabilize some of the existing banks that are not going to be used for the concrete piling or the composting areas.
Otherwise, you've looked at the fund and determined that it is in an appropriate amount, have you?
And that, yes, that's what our staff says, yep.
Yeah, okay. Financial assurance, that's the term you use to cover all the different ways of providing the money in case there's a bankruptcy and the county has to step in and restore the site to
Reclaim it,
a
yep.
usable, safe fashion. Uh-huh.
It was last renewed, the mining, in 2023.
Oh, okay. Board members, any questions at this stage? No? Okay. You want to speak, Mr. Netchville, I bet?
One thing that we had talked about is the storage of snow to melt from parking lot. That is now not going to happen. Another thing you talked about is development of the area, major subdivisions in Warren Township as it is set right now. All major subdivisions have to have central water, central sewer, and as to date, we've had a couple, I'm on the Town of Warren's Planning Board, we've had a couple companies propose development, but after they get involved with the costs of central water, central sewer, they have declined to develop in Warren Township, which is in the likes of the major population of Warren Township, which was the town of Warren and the township of the town of Warren and the city of Roberts, or the village of Roberts, is doing a joint planning together, and it's come up at that board that we still want to maintain the major subdivision ordinance as it is planned. Is there any other questions that you would like to ask me? I'll try and answer.
Did I remember correctly that it's a 25-foot conveyor that you plan to use to build these two piles with?
It would probably be bigger than 25, but you have to have a longer conveyor to get a 25-foot high stack than just 25 foot.
That's right. Pythagoras showed how to do the calculation, didn't he? The square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the legs of a triangle.
Well, that geometry, and I did not do well in geometry.
Oh,
Give me a
well.
builder's square and I can do something.
All right. All right. So how tall are these 5,000 yard piles going to be at their maximum?
Well, physically stacking with the equipment that I have is probably going to be 14 to 20 feet high. You could get them to 25 foot high hauling in debris, but then you have to maintain a access road to back up the concrete rubble with a truck, and it's probably just going to be stacked with payloaders and backhoes because of the cost of maintaining a road to back a rubber-tired vehicle up and down on.
Okay. So if we approve your request for two piles of 5,000 cubic yards, but we set a maximum height of, say, 15 feet, would that work for you?
Why don't we go to 20 feet, and then it's going to be less than 25 and more than 15, so you get a little give and take room there.
I hear you, but the counterpoise to that is requiring the berms to block the view of it from off-site properties.
Well, the floor of the pit is below the surrounding ag field to begin with.
Okay, how much below is it?
10 to 12 feet without surveying it out.
Okay. Thanks. I had forgotten that while I was trying to remember Pythagoras.
Well, you can't remember everything like all of us.
Yeah.
Can't remember it either.
So the floor of the pit is 10 to 12 feet below surrounding ground. That's an important factor, I think, in terms of visibility and noise and dust and all the things that neighbors tend to complain about these pits. Anybody else have questions? What about the 20 trucks a day accessing and egressing and busy Highway Double T and a turn lane kind of thing?
Well, if you take 20 trucks per day with intervals of hauling in between in and out, you're probably not going to have a truck up by the road more than a minute at a time. So if you have, just if they were back to back, it'd still be about, by the time you pull in, dump off, you're going to be probably a cycle time of 5 minutes in the pit itself maximum. The shortest, it could be even longer. So, and there may be days during the week that no trucks are going to be there. So it's kind of a projected 20 trucks a day is trying to be somewhat realistic on my part.
Yeah, and they wouldn't necessarily be at the time that commuters are trying to get back and forth on Double T.
It would be throughout the day. You can't have 20 trucks leave from a job site and be there all the same time, especially if you start at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Yes, there are going to be trucks there that are going to be there between 6:30 and 7:30, but it's probably going to be a lesser number than 20.
When we set these things up, these approvals of conditional use permits, and when we feel there's an appropriate need for conditions, we try to pick conditions that the limited staff will be able to enforce if enforcement is necessary. So if the highway department is on the fence about whether a turn lane, bypass lane is needed, and we said, well, instead of that, we're going to put a ceiling on the number of trucks each day. And you're following my direction here?
And that would be determined later on rather than today.
Right. We'd probably need to hear from the highway department next
Correct.
month. And but if we were to say maximum of 30 trucks a day on a 5-day rolling average, you could probably live with that for the duration of this permit?
I would think we probably can.
Yeah.
I'll have Mr. Valdez is going to rent the property, so I'll have him address that question to help address it.
Good.
Good morning, everyone.
I
So when
didn't
we
catch
say-
your name, though, please.
My name is Joe Valdez. I own the Valdez Lawn Care Snow Removal Company. When
Excellent.
we put 20 trucks on site coming in daily, it's not mean the 20 truck is gonna be in the pit at the same time. So realistic, you're not looking at truck more than a half hour to 45 minutes a piece. And this is let's say we got a job that we haul everything going in. So let's say we haul wood chips. We'll have a walking floor trailer coming in. It's gonna be 1 in the morning, 5 hours later, the truck will come back. The reason we put number in there is to know it's gonna be 20 trucks during the day. So divide the 20 trucks in 9 hour, Jeff, you're looking probably an hour, 2 trucks per hour is gonna get in the traffic. So it's not gonna be like in and out, 20 trucks every 5 minutes out of the pit.
I get it.
So,
I get it. Of course, we have to plan for the future, and
Yep.
this is,
Yeah.
you have a 5-year permit. So you might be the renter this year, and somebody else might be the renter next year. We have to be objective about it. Mr. Peterson?
My concern in reference to that traffic is I cross Double T in the mornings a lot, going here and there, just down the road from there. And the speed of those cars is just, my concern is the safety of not only the traffic, but your truck drivers coming out of that. That's why I'm thought maybe possibly a turn lane or something might be. I'm not advocating for it necessarily, but that's the concern that I'm bringing up.
and we're willing to work with the highway request on it. So they asked us to have to make have a like right turn lane or something like that. We definitely want to work with them. So.
I'm shooting from memory, but my memory is that there are good sight lines from this driveway, aren't there? Quite
They're
long.
as good as you're going to get in the county. You got about a half a mile each way.
Yeah, and that's certainly a factor in favor of doing this.
Currently, there's no houses nearby, is there?
The only thing
the
is
other
next to
corner.
me is a ag irrigation well,
All right.
which is just probably 30 feet or 20 feet off my easterly property line. The nearest house would be 1/4 mile west of me at the intersection. And then you have the Gillis Farm, which is like a half a mile to the east.
All right, anything else you want to get on the record here at this point? Is there anybody else in the room who wanted to speak in favor of this application? How about opposition? Anybody who's opposed to what's being proposed here? Or neither for nor against, but got something to say? All right, members, I'm inclined to ask for a few things before we make our decision. I I think we could deal with the potential height of the piles versus berm to screen the view by just a limitation of the height of the pile, and it looks like, given the depth of the pit and the fact that he doesn't need the piles to be terribly high, that's not going to be an issue. I'm a little concerned about the surface water management, particularly in view of the 25-year storm level that we have been imposing on the Riverway people, and has become something that I'd like some more input in myself. I'd like to hear from Highway before rather than after. If they want us to limit the number of trucks per day, 30 per day or something like that, instead of a bypass lane. So there'd be some, and I'd like confirmation from the staff that the floor of the pit is actually 10 to 12 feet down, and that the surface water will settle out the wood chips and any concrete dust and that kind of stuff, rather than carry it over into that intermittent stream to be moved around the next year before approving this application. That's where I'm coming from. Let's hear from you.
Mr. Chair, I can provide one point on that. I did pull it up on my laptop there while the applicants were speaking, and the pit floor is at about 980 feet, and the surrounding farm field to the east is around 995 feet, and it goes up from there up to 1,000 feet. So the applicant was very accurate when he said between 12 and 15 feet below the existing farm field.
12 to 15. Well, that's good.
So, yep, according to our elevation data.
So we could probably let the piles be as high as 20 feet without any visibility issues being problematic, I would guess. That's good to know. Can you resolve the questions about surface water management from your data that's with you today?
The pit is internally drained right now, only because of that man-made berm on the west side between the bigger ponds and the smaller pond that is within the pit. But otherwise, in that, like Mike mentioned, and that there wouldn't be any floodwaters that could get back out of the pit from if there was any waters that came in it, or if the groundwater elevation came up. It would be isolated to the pit because it would be internally drained. So.
And to what year storm? Don't know
I
yet.
don't know if we could say that. So.
Yeah, I mean, that floodplain actually extends all the way down to the Kinnickinnick. It finds its way down. But how accurate our floodplain maps are, we know they're not very accurate, honestly. And so whether it really connects all the way and whether water would just infiltrate, or whether, in a big event, you would get water flow to a receiving water, it's a little hard for us to say without a detailed study.
So when we consider the floodplain map as it's mapped right now, the pit floor here, according to our data, is about 980, and for sure over here, this is at 1,000 feet. So we've got 20 feet of flood elevation, and a lot of these maps got off when they took the paper copy of the map and made it electronic, because those fat lines and that identifying the floodplain boundary were expanded to be bigger than what they actually should have been. So that's some of it. The only way to really define where the floodway and the flood fringe is here would be to do a H&H analysis on that creek. So,
What would that need to be done from all of the correct length that's encompassed in the Netchville property? across the width of the 80 there?
It would, I'm not an engineer, but it would probably only be done for the pit 40. And what I mean by that is when they're going to be considering that creek, they're going to consider the whole watershed and the amount of water that can come down the whole watershed to hit that parcel. So essentially, yes, they would be doing that whole area, but really they would probably only have the study and the mapping for that South 40 where the existing pit is.
Because they could do that from detailed topographic data, right where the intermittent stream crosses the property, just from its cross-section, in other words.
Correct. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
In the mining application, I mean, there is a, one of the site maps indicates the, sort of the center line of the channel that kind of runs along the the west boundary of the property where the big water feature is there. It kind of runs through north-south through that area for your interest. And in terms of the implications of floodplain management on the site, if any permanent structures were being proposed, obviously we would have to require that kind of study. But they're not proposing any structures with this request or with the mining either.
And generally in the floodplain, any fill being brought into the site is always an issue if it's within the floodplain, because then it's taking capacity away. But when they're bringing stuff in and taking it back out, and the existing pit is already much lower than what it is, they've actually, by creating a pit there, probably increased the reserve capacity of a floodwater in that area. Because the amount of fill that they bring in, the 5,000 cubic yards, will not exceed what has been removed off the property over the years.
You also have the railroad on the north side that would impede any massive water flow, wouldn't it?
Correct. There's a bridge structure
But the water
there.
flows south there, I think.
There must be just a small culvert or something underneath the railroad there?
Yep, I believe it's right here and that. So, do you know if it's a bridge, Mike, or a culvert?
It's a bridge.
Is it a bridge? Okay.
Probably about 40, 50-foot span. It's a guesstimate on, I've never measured it.
So that's a source of water, not,
But the water flow would be south toward DeKinney, is that correct?
that's correct, yeah, yeah. So that,
In a rather meandering.
Rather meandering way.
certainly, certainly.
Kind of follows my mouse here, comes down through the water, then goes down on the other side of County Road T and into a waterway. So,
What do you highway dudes think about the traffic and that part of it? Are you still concerned, or?
It wouldn't hurt to have highway have a look at it, but it's not, I guess, a major concern. But having sat there maybe a minute and a half in the morning traffic, I mean, there's a lot of cars using that road.
Is the number gonna decrease in the future?
I don't think so.
If I had any concern, it would be about the young drivers on that road when school's on, but can't do anything about that.
Well, we can try to keep them from running into trucks, can't we?
They get penalized by speeding tickets, which these St. Croix County cops use my entrance driveway to watch traffic.
Is that pretty productive for them meeting their quotas? Oops, I shouldn't say that.
We don't talk about quotas, you're not supposed to say that. It does, I think it does help a little bit, but the young teen drivers, pretty short on what can happen with a speeding car.
Is it up to us on the conditional use to determine what the highway department's gonna decide?
Yeah. It's up to us to have an integrated plan with the highway department so that they don't do A and we do B incompatibly. If,
I mean,
If-
we can't dictate to the highway department, can we?
oh, no, we wouldn't wish to do that,
Yeah,
nor would
right.
we want them to dictate to us. You know, our activity really begins at the easement, I suppose. But you know, a few years ago, we required that Ready Randy's put aside an amount of money for a future turn lane. And then when it was decided to do that roundabout, the money was there and the land was ready to go when the other three corners put in their part. We're all advocates of growth, you know, new jobs, business expansion, that's all good stuff. But it's a balancing act, getting it right.
So, Mr. Chair, there's been a lot of conversation about the highway department approval, and if the board was willing to grant, our staff created some conditions here that could be applied to the applicant, and number 2 is directly related to the highway department approval. The applicant shall obtain a driveway access permit from the St. Croix County Highway Department related to the change of use of the subject property if required. And so that's how we were, you know, gonna address it as staff. You know, before they could operate this use, they would have to take and have the highway department on board. And then, as the applicant and we know very well, this application could be reviewed every 5 years. And that is part of the renewal process of that pit.
Yep. All right, I think we're at the stage of closing the hearing and moving to a decision. Everybody agree? Yep, it's 9:52, so we won't take any more evidence at this point. We'll move forward to a decision. Does somebody, it sounds like there are probably 3 of you that want to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation and adopt it as our own decision. But maybe you have other ideas. Floor is open.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to go down through some suggested conditions that could be tied to the motion?
In addition to the ones that are already printed?
Oh, no, it'd be the same as those.
The
So,
same as these,
yep.
yeah. Well, we're,
Mr. Wozniak is ahead of me, so.
yeah,
I did provide the applicant with a copy of that document you're viewing, Mr. Chair, as well.
yeah.
I move we approve the conditional use permit with the stipulations that have already been agreed on.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Unanimous. All right. Are you so far ahead, Mr. Wozniak, you have a document for me to sign?
On this one, I do not, because
Okay.
I wasn't sure if there were gonna be anything added, but we'll follow up. I'm gonna hand you for the next item, a document that does look like a decision document, and you can decide if you're, once you get through the proceedings, if you're comfortable with the content.
Okay, so we'll take up the Benjamin application now for office and storage. And that is in our packet from page 134 to page 148. Welcome back, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
ready for me to start, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay. Scott Benjamin requests a conditional use permit for a contractor storage yard and office space in a property that is zoned R1 under section 15.330 of the St. Croix County zoning ordinance for a 6.8 acre parcel located in the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of section 13, town 28 north, range 15 west. It's in the town of Katy and is further located at the address of 316 325th Street. The Community Development Department has provided the proper Class 2 hearing notice prior to our meeting today. So the applicant operates Dreamscapes Natural Pools, and they would like to take and store their equipment and have an office in a building that would be associated with their house on their property. This report was created by Mike Wozniak, our land use administrator. The building total square footage would be 6,336 square feet. It's approximately 440 feet off the road and 118 feet from any property line. The storage of their pool business equipment and supplies will be located within the building, so it's not an outside contractor storage yard. This is just a general overview of where the property is. It's almost into Dunn County, so it's right over on the very east side of the county in the town of Katy, like I mentioned before. An aerial of the property shows their driveway coming in here and their existing dwelling on site. The property to the north is a mix of ag and forest. There are some neighbors across the road, but everything going to the southeast and to the south has a lot of forest cover, but there are a couple of dwellings there now as well. Here's just a closer view. So 325th Street is over on the right-hand side of this photo. There's their existing house. I haven't been to the site, so I'm unaware.
I have, and it appeared to me that it is well underway.
The applicant is here and can maybe address that question when it's open to them. Staff, is not aware that the construction has started.
Okay, so then the property, the areas in pink and a darker pink or a red here are the areas that are identified by steeper slopes. So the light pink is 12 to 20% slopes. The darker pink or red is 20 to 25% slopes. So in general, the property doesn't have a lot of slopes over 25%. The existing house here shows where the existing well and septic system are, and the new proposed building here, or if that building is underway, that is where it would be located. 325th Street is at the bottom of our page. So then when we look at their applicants' responses to the questions, they want to take and have the small office space for storage of their own equipment and the business equipment. They don't believe there's any impact to the surrounding properties because the building will match the home's color scheme and barely be seen from the road. Most of the neighbors have similar outbuildings or sheds on their property. The space will be used to store skid steers, backhoes, four-wheelers, and personal trucks. and also allow them to move their existing home office into the new office space. And their goal is to clean up the property because their business stuff won't be sitting outside. They propose to build the building to commercial standards. And they intend to have a very well-cleaned job site and with everything inside.
They promise never to sell this or to die. Or if they do, their successors will meet the same standards.
Well, and that's a condition that the Board of Adjustment could consider if there was concerns about, maybe these people will operate a very nice, clean business, but maybe we have concern about a building of this size being operated for the same kind of use, but maybe not in the same manner down the road. The CUP could terminate with ownership transfer if the board wanted to do that. Okay, so then when reviewing the requirements, our staff believes that their application complies with this requirement for a contractor storage yard in an R1 zoning classification. Number 2, and that sounds like maybe the board has drove by the site, but it says that the conditional use or land use permit shall be obtained before any new buildings are constructed on the site. We believe that they met that requirement, but if they have started construction since our staff were out there, then that would be incorrect. The applicant shall not store or erect any structures, services, or operations, vehicles, or employees not indicated in the approved plans. We believe that they have met that requirement, except for if the building has been started. Generally, if a building is being built, we don't have the use approved until after it goes through the Board of Adjustment. So if they were building that building just to store their own personal toys in or their own equipment, that would be totally allowed. If they were operating their pool business out of that building and then came to the Board of Adjustment to seek approval, that would be considered an after-the-fact request. And that generally we would not consider it after the fact just because the building has been built on the site. The applicant intends to have the property clean and neat and orderly. So if they do that, we believe they would comply with that standard. The applicant is proposing hours between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. The applicant does not really indicate any outdoor lights on the property or on the shed, except for the yard light between the house and building. And the applicant does have some wooded land that screens the building and house from the road because they're back about 400 feet. And so that's what we've got for our staff report.
Board members, do you have any questions? Are the applicants here?
Yes.
Okay, could we hear from the applicants, please?
Absolutely.
Please come up to our microphone. Have you signed our form? Please do it and then come to our. Right over. You can badger all you want. Are you Mrs. Benjamin?
I am.
Yeah, good. And you're gonna have a pool business there, huh? You already have a pool business, but it's not in the building yet.
Yes.
All right. You've heard the presentation. Is there anything you disagree with that was presented here just now? No? Has Mrs. Benjamin been provided a copy of the proposed decision?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to look at it? If I sign this, is that okay with you? Is that what you want?
Yes.
Nothing you'd change in it?
No.
All right, great. Anything else you want to say?
No.
Very good. Board members, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Your business, it's installing swimming pools, is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
And various landscaping associated with it.
Yes.
Yep. They apparently offer a fuller range of services. I read somewhere in the file here. Yep.
Saltwater pools, if we understand correctly. Is that right, Kathy?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a
Thank you.
different type of pool. It's not normal.
All right. Okay, don't leave yet, but thank you. Is there anybody in the room who wants to speak in favor of this application? Anybody opposed to it? Anybody want to say anything about it? Board members, I propose to end the hearing and proceed to a decision.
Okay.
None of your questions have suggested anything controversial is running through your mind, but you'll have an opportunity to bring it up. So the hearing's closed at 10:06. Anything you want to add to the findings of fact? Item number 12 there is a place to put in additional facts if something came out in the hearing that you think is important to our decision. But if you don't, there's no harm, no foul. Motion time?
Move we approve the conditional use permit as presented.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Discussion? All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. It's unanimously approved. I've signed it. If somebody will give me one of theirs, I'll use that one and you can give it to Mrs. Benjamin. Today is the 24th of April. The people that I thought were associated with the next thing, the solar farm, aren't here right now, but that was just an inference on my part, maybe. Oh, okay, you're the ones. Good show. Who were those three gentlemen who were sitting in the front row earlier? Was that on, they're the ones that are gonna buy it from Henry Netchville? As soon as we approve?
I think that's correct, Mr. Chair.
She was terrorized.
Huh?
The poor girl was terrorized.
Yeah, she is.
Have they given you a contract, Joe, to the new buyers to continue to employ you?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Nickum?
I have to recuse myself. I'm on the Town of Baldwin Planning Board, and I've already voted on this, so I have to recuse myself.
All right. You promise not to applaud or approve or indicate that it thumbs up or thumbs up? You may sit in the audience if you'd like to, or you may go home, I suppose, but we may have some discussion at the end of the meeting about next meeting or whatever. This could be a long presentation, I don't know, but we certainly have a thick file. approximately an inch with respect to this one. So it's your choice, Mr. Nickum.
With all due respect to the board, Mr. Chairman, I think I will go home.
All right, thank you for your presence up to this point. You're making the presentation, Mike?
Yes. Okay, the last agenda item you have on today's agenda is consideration of a conditional use permit request for Mill Pond Park LLC for a 15 megawatt solar energy system, photovoltaic solar project. The request is for a site located in the town of Baldwin. The project would sit on about 81 acres on 3 parcels that would total about 118 acres. The property is located in Section 29 in town of Baldwin, and I'll note that hearing notice requirements have been met for this item. Let's just, I think I'm going to cursor down to, we have a PowerPoint on this one. Just bear with me. Actually, we got the application first, so I'm going to find my PowerPoint, if you can bear with me, and if we need to refer to any of the application items or supporting studies, I do have those accessible individually if any questions arise. That might be easier than to cursor through the entire submittal, which was included in the Board of Adjustment packet.
Well, I don't want to, tell you your business, but this is one of those areas of the law where the scope of the Board of Adjustment is pretty limited. We do not have the authority to just make decisions that are as wide-ranging as in our typical cases. We are hedged around by a state law that we would have to have pretty strong evidence of an effect that's damaging or deleterious in order to say no to one of these applications. Aesthetics alone, for instance, would not enable us to turn it down. I was trying to see if I could quickly find those limits in order to explain why.
I will address those in the overview I give, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
They're in part of the staff report on this.
That may help to explain why out of this 1 inch of documents you are going to cover only a very little bit of it.
Correct. As I stated, this is a site in the town of Baldwin. It's close to the village limits as well, on the north side of Highway 12. The applicant is requesting conditional use permit approval for a 15 megawatt solar energy system, and we allow essentially in all our districts commercial solar energy systems that are intended primarily to provide power, not for an on-site use, as a conditional use. And the county does have provisions, use regulations in section 15.385 regarding solar energy systems. And essentially, that's what we're evaluating this proposal against. As is customary, we've included a copy of the staff report that I'm going to run through, and the full application submitted from the Nokomis Solar with the applicant structured as Mill Pond Park LLC for this application. And and we also have included a comment letter from the town of Baldwin. They are supportive of this project. And I can just follow down here through the presentation. We've got a site map here which shows the parcels involved in the proposal. Again, these three would total about 118 acres, but the actual project area would be about 81 acres of within this site. Basically the applicants determined this is a viable site to develop a project of this scale, and has the ability to interconnect with the power transmission system to convey the electricity that would be generated through this 15 megawatt project. Oops. There's an extensive package of information that was submitted. A lot of the information that the county is asking for is we're requesting this information so that essentially we can be confident we understand the scope of the project and any potential environmental impacts that may come with the change in use of the property. And in this case, we've gotten an excellent submittal from the applicant, and really all of the type of information that we would request, as much of which is optional but helpful in terms of increasing the comfort level of the county with projects of this sort. This slide just indicates the variety of submittal material that was provided, different studies or supporting information, including a decommissioning plan and proposed decommissioning agreement, as well as a variety of studies that would look at potential environmental impacts or impacts even on things like glare or visual impacts with project renderings to show, essentially give a sense what the project would look like. Our staff review, we've determined that the information provided satisfies our conditional use permit submittal requirements for this kind of application. And we note that section 15.385 includes criteria that the Board of Adjustment is limited to considering when reviewing a conditional use permit application for a solar energy system. I'll touch on those further into my overview here. And the application's extensive background information, site analysis data and studies and proposed plans, again, meet or exceed the county's submittal requirements for a conditional use permit for a solar energy system. In our section 15.385, we would view this proposal as falling under a large solar energy system, and hence it's subject to a conditional use permit, as long as it is under 100 megawatts, which is a threshold for review by State of Wisconsin Public Services Commission. I just called out the standards in section 385, and I'm not going to run through each of these, but what I'm going to say is that the information to address these issues has been provided. In terms of code compliance, the application, building code, electrical, is subject to applicable electrical and building code requirements as administered by the town of Baldwin or and the state of Wisconsin. So that gets beyond the purview, as the chair was indicating, of the county. And I won't keep reiterating, I think the application meets our submittal requirements. Very informative and complete submittal. Regarding the description of what's proposed, again, a 15 megawatt project sitting on about 81 acres of the project area within an R1 zoned district. And the applicants requesting a 2-year period within which to start construction, and I do address that in proposed conditions for an action on this. I'll get to that later. I'll note that they provided a little much more detail describing the project. I haven't reiterated it, a lot of it in the staff report, but it is in the application, which I'm sure you've looked at, and we can refer to if you feel a need to do so.
Mike,
yes.
question.
Yes.
The Baldwin Jump Airport there is to the west of there, a fair amount, but
Yeah.
did you get any comments from them? I'm thinking of the glare thing, if that would.
Yeah, they're that is they're located in to the west on the other side of the village, and I don't see how that would affect. There's nothing tall in these. The height is very limited on these solar panels, and it's not very proximate to it. So you would really have to have a skydiver off course to land on this particular 80 acres.
Yeah, no, I was just referencing the glare and that plane. I know when they climb, I'm not sure how big their patterns are, and they're continually, I assume, elliptical pattern or whatever in their climb and stuff. So I just thought about the
They have.
glare.
I think Baldwin's Airport is included in the glare analysis. Now, you may not necessarily agree with their contractor's conclusion, but they have addressed it.
Yes.
I'm not finding I'm still looking for the packet page for that glare analysis, but I think I saw it.
I could pull that up if
I'll tell you when I find it.
if you would wish for me to do so. Just a map to orient. You can see the village limits of Baldwin, and there's basically across the intersection of 220th and Highway 12. You hit the village limits of Baldwin with Mill Pond Park over there. A little bit more information on the project. It's from the applicant's submittal, and essentially the panels would sit approximately 10 feet off the ground at their highest point, and steel driven posts embedded in the ground, similar to the St. Croix Valley Solar Project application that you reviewed a couple years ago now. The applicant would enclose the system with a 7-foot tall agricultural fence to minimize visual impact and restrict access to the system from unqualified personnel. And cover crop inside the footprint of the system would be low-growth native crops, forbs, and flowers to promote pollinator-friendly habitat. And again, details have been provided with the application, including a vegetation plan. This is just a one of the site maps, excerpt of it from the application, and I've noted specifically the Appendix D and E that provide information about the layout and specifications. And 220th Street borders the site on the west, and Highway 12 to the south. And there are some drainage areas that essentially the work is staying out of in terms of improvements and site alteration. The current county zoning that of the site and surrounding the site, either R1 or Ag 1 in our county zoning, and there is to the south of Highway 12, there's some commercial and industrial zoning as well with some existing uses, and then it is proximate to the village limits of Baldwin as well. Quickly surrounding land uses, properties to east, north, and west are utilized for agriculture or conservation purposes. Properties south of the site and south of Highway 12 include commercial uses and the Mill Pond Park within the village of Baldwin. I'll note among the materials provided, the applicants provided information about wetlands analysis. They've conducted an on-site wetland delineation. 2 wetlands and 2 intermittent streams were identified within the project areas. The project was designed to avoid impacts and include a 75-foot buffer of the stream features. There isn't anything that's identified as actually shoreland area on this site for the interest of the Board of Adjustment. Just a couple comments on vegetation, because one of the county's concerns with solar development is how the vegetation, since it often is transitioning from agricultural use or pasture, in this case it's been in conservation CRP with hay and alfalfa on parts of it. They've included a vegetation management plan. The entire array, including perimeter inside the fence, would be seeded with a native pollinator-friendly mix. That's included, again, in one of the appendices that were included with the application. The site is ecologically considered a loamy upland prairie, with 80% of it comprised of well-drained soil, and the remaining soil types presenting a loamy, somewhat poorly drained soils. The site historically has been used for agriculture, cultivated row crops for the past 10 years. But for the past 10 years, it's been planted in a CRP, hay and alfalfa pasture mix. And I'd note that typically the native mixes that are used with these solar projects provide good habitat for wildlife, for birds, bees, insects, that sort of thing. And so it's actually beneficial in that regard. The long-term maintenance is proposed to include mowing to manage annual weeds, transitioning into annual target zone herbicide spraying, and mowing throughout the life of the array. And they provide a little bit of information on the pollinator-friendly seed mix that they're intending to use. Regarding sound report and electronic and magnetic field study, this is one of the kind of optional submittal items we call out in our section 3.85. The applicant is indicated to be happy to conduct a pre-construction sound study and electric and magnetic field study as well. I've had quite a bit of experience, as I've explained to the board previously, with permitting solar energy systems, both some here in St. Croix County and some previously. Noise concerns or stray voltage, I would tell you, are typically not associated. I shouldn't say associated, I should say not associated with photovoltaic solar energy systems. And so by my experience, that typically has not been a big issue or concern. Oftentimes the stray voltage is coming from existing uses that with issues with their electrical systems, if there is such a problem. Just for your information, visual renderings have been provided in the application materials. We're not really judging these projects strictly on that. If there were residential properties immediately abutting, those kinds of impacts, I think, maybe are a bigger concern. That's not really the case with this project at this time. But nevertheless, the visual renderings included in the application, I think, would give you a good idea of what the project will look like if constructed. And we did allude already to the glare analysis report, Appendix H of the submittal, and it finds no glare is predicted to impact the nearby roadways or surrounding airports. I've kind of summarized, and I won't read through all of this information. I'm sure you've looked through the staff report regarding conclusions drawn regarding the studies and supporting information provided. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And in terms of market for the power, the project is known as distributed generation. Distributed solar projects support the reliability and efficiency of the electric grid by producing high power quality via steady supply voltage and delivering electricity efficiently by reducing line losses through local generation. This project would tend to fall under a more distributed, as opposed to some of the bigger projects proposed in our area that are maybe in the 100 megawatt plus kind of range. They're easier to fit into the existing grid is what you can conclude from something of this size or smaller. The project, as proposed, would not displace agricultural production, and the acreage of the project has been idle under the USDA Conservation Reserve Program contract for over 20 years. So the You know, and it's located, although it kind of abuts at a corner, or at least close to the Mill Pond Park. Other areas in the village, it would be separated by 40 to 60 acres and somewhat removed from immediately nearby residential housing. Just a few comments on decommissioning and site restoration. And when I run through some recommended conditions, this will be addressed as well. Essentially, the applicant's making a commitment to decommission and restore the site to pre-development condition at the end of the system's serviceable life, and they've estimated 35 plus years for that. And the project owner will be responsible for all costs associated with decommissioning. And they further clarify what is intended with decommissioning. And again, I won't read these bullet points verbatim, but if you have any questions, either myself or the applicant could certainly answer them. And I'll note that a decommissioning plan and also a decommissioning restoration agreement, draft agreement, was provided with the application. I'll note that our corporation counsel has reviewed that and is suggesting a few changes that are primarily regarding the form of the agreement as opposed to substance. A couple issues that could affect substance of the agreement, like, for example, an appropriate amount for liability coverage. If the board is comfortable, we feel that we're very close on what would be satisfactory in terms of decommissioning requirements, and that could be negotiated by staff. And you'll see that I have a recommended condition in the document you've seen that it would be the agreement would be subject to adjustments recommended by the Corporation Council. And honestly, we appreciate the effort of the applicant to take a shot at providing such an agreement to save the work for the county, which the last go we did this, and of course it was a bigger project. Essentially, putting that draft agreement fell on my shoulders, and it was a little bit of heavy lifting on that one. Regarding road access, the project would be accessed from 220th Street, Town of Baldwin Road, and so at such time as they want to create the access, they would be required to get access approval from the town. We did include with the packet that the town has expressed support for the project and included a comment letter as Exhibit 3 with the application, with the board packet materials, I should say. And so we don't anticipate that they would have any issue. They've seen what's being proposed and how it would be accessed. Again, we've heard from the town, and the applicant is coordinating with the Wisconsin DNR. We haven't gotten any comments from DNR. They're largely staying out of the sensitive areas. There is some floodplain identified, but not shoreland on this property. And we don't see any negative impacts from this on those water resources. Your purview, as your chair has indicated, is somewhat more limited on this. Your options are to approve the request, deny the request, or table and postpone if you feel you need more information. We've included a more detailed document in the staff report. I had just outlined some preliminary findings, and a document that was provided to you just today and also to the applicant also includes proposed conclusions of law and a staff recommendations in terms of conditions that would be associated with a potential approval of this item. I won't reiterate the factual information that I've already gone through that's referenced in these findings. Let me see if I can pull up that SharePoint document. Here we go. So what I handed out before starting the presentation was this findings of fact, conclusions of law, and decision proposed action for the Board of Adjustment on this item. Again, I won't reiterate the findings. I think it's factual information about the project that you've seen in the presentation as well as the application. If you feel that any findings should be added to this, then we would be happy to amend this and put it in the form of a decision document for signature. I would note that under conclusions of law, this is where we get into kind of the more limited purview of for consideration of the board in terms of acting on this. And basically, we have these criteria in section 15.385, and basically they limit the consideration to, does the project serve the, are conditions necessary to serve, to preserve or protect public health or safety. We've noted here that adverse impacts to public health are not anticipated to result from construction or operation of the project. Temporary impacts from construction may occur from the use of construction equipment. However, these impacts would be minimized using best management practices and will be short-term in nature. Potential impacts during the project from glare, noise, electromagnetic frequency have all been evaluated and are discussed in further detail in the application submittal. And based on the studies submitted, no adverse impacts are anticipated from construction or operation of the project. And further, the other two areas that the project may not significantly increase the conditions may not significantly increase cost of the system or significantly decrease its efficiency. We review these as a conditional use, and it's allowed. It's a use that may be allowed as in the R1 residential zone district. We're noting that the applicant has designed the project to minimize impacts on regulated water resources and is planned to manage the stormwater and limit erosion and sedimentation both during construction and during operation of the project while designing a project that meets production and economic expectations. The last point under the conclusions of law I'd make is that the if the project were to be denied, it would have to allow for an alternative system of comparable cost and efficiency. Well, the conditional use permit review will support approval of the preferred design layout for the project is the conclusion staff have reached, and therefore an alternative system of comparable cost and efficiency is not necessary. Regarding decision, if I can get my cursor to cooperate here, I'm going to run through at least I think the most pertinent of the proposed conditions that staff is recommending that the board consider enacting on this. We do believe that the Board of Adjustment should approve this conditional use permit request, and again, subject to these conditions that I'll briefly run through, at least some of the most relevant ones. This would be approving a conditional use for 15 megawatt solar energy system in an R1 zone district, and I've called out the sections of the ordinance that apply. Our use table 15.285 are solar use provisions in 15.385 of the ordinance, and 15.550 is our procedural requirements for approving processing conditional use permits. I note that the solar projects, including this one, would be monitored and maintenance performed as needed. The applicant has addressed that in their submittal information. We call out a standard condition that the applicant's responsible for securing any necessary local, state, federal permits, licenses, approvals. Among other things for this site would include any building permit requirements that the town of Baldwin would impose on the project. The lighting, we do expect to require, and we're proposing it as part of the conditions, a follow-up land use permit. The plans submitted are preliminary, and if there are any changes, the land use permit, which is reviewed administratively by staff, would ensure that they are generally consistent with the approval that would come from the board on this conditional use permit. Regarding lighting, if there's any security lighting, typically with these kinds of projects, again, it's directed downward and not off the property if in fact security lighting is part of the ultimate construction. Regarding timing, proposed site improvements, the applicants asked for a couple years, and we've noted that we would like to see a land use permit to confirm final plans and to address stormwater management, grading, erosion sediment control measures. A lot of information has been provided with the CUP submittal, but that's a way for us to ensure that those water resources are being protected, and that setbacks are being from property lines are being conformed to, that sort of thing. Regarding when the project would be constructed, the applicants indicated the intent. They've asked for 2 years, basically. I guess I should reiterate, and I think somewhere in here, I think it's further down, I'll find it. Under number 10, we've indicated that we're recommending that the applicant shall have 2.5 years from the approval date to begin construction. And the feeling there is that should line up with their anticipated construction start. Typically, what we do not want to do on these projects is have an indefinite time to start where land use could change around the project area. So, but in this case, it's realistic for solar project of this scale where delays can occur, as opposed to the 1 year to start that we often include with conditional use permits. And the other thing I would focus on here is, let's see, not to go through everything. We have some conditions regarding meetings with emergency responders. This was something that was devised when the Board of Adjustment considered the St. Croix Valley solar project a couple years ago over in Richmond and Warren. Basically to ensure that emergency response, if there were to be any, say, fire issues or injury issues, that they're coordinated with local emergency responders. And I'd also like to call out in these conditions regarding the decommissioning and site restoration agreement. The Corporation Council has reviewed this recently in the last few days and recommended a few changes. We feel we can work those changes out. They're relatively minor in terms of the compared to what was submitted for a draft agreement from the applicant. And if the board is comfortable with that, we could, and gives staff direction, and Corporation Council can work with the applicant and to final up that agreement. We're recommending, since they're not talking about immediate timetable for construction, we're recommending that that agreement be finalized and filed with the Register of Deeds in 90 days, basically by the end of July. We think that would be sufficient. At that, we have a couple of our standard kind of conditions we include with conditional use permits. Since you have this recommendation in front of you, I can answer any questions you may have about anything else. At this point, I'll close my remarks. We have the applicant represented here, and they'd be happy to further detail any information you would like or answer your questions about the proposed project.
Board members? All right, we'll hear from the applicant then.
Hello, my name is Fritz Ebinger. I'm the project developer. I work for Nokomis Energy. I did sign in on the sheet, so you have my name recorded. I just want to thank the staff and thank the Board of Adjustment for taking the time and the effort to look through the application and study up on it. We think this is a great project because it's on land that's been in CRP for over 20 years, so we're not taking up any agricultural use. It's a well-sited project because it serves effectively it serves the load for the village of Baldwin. We're a distributed developer. That means that we don't do the great big projects that go through the Public Services Commission. We permit our projects at the local level, and we pride ourselves in partnering with the local community. I did meet with the town of Baldwin 3 times to talk about the project and answer questions from the community. They had some concerns about mostly weather than anything else, but we resolved those issues with general liability insurance and then also hail damage insurance, and then sometimes there's revenue insurance as well. The site, it's a great site. Mr. Wozniak also mentioned that we planted native pollinator species to actually add habitat back. I think the Carner blue butterfly came up in one of our studies, so we'll be giving a little bit of that back to the butterfly. And then, also what I didn't mention is that the inbound revenue that the county and the town of Baldwin would see. So it's the utility aid program for the state of Wisconsin has the utility company paying $4,500 per megawatt for these kinds of projects. So that's new revenue, and we don't ask for anything like street maintenance or a new sewer line or anything like that. So based on that, I'll step back and listen to any questions that you have.
Is the equipment vulnerable to wildfire once you get it installed and the vegetation is growing and so on?
No differently than any other structure. The way solar projects are protected is they have either rapid shutdown mechanisms in them. They also have knife switches. So if emergency personnel shows up on site, they cut down the knife switch. A knife switch basically opens or closes the circuit. And that's how they isolate the solar array.
The panels themselves, at their maximum, are about 10 feet off the ground, I think I read, and since they're 8 by 4, I think, at their minimum, I suppose they're about 4 feet off the ground, or 3 feet, something like that. Or is a fire apt to damage the panels?
They're subject to damage by fire like other structures are. So if there's a fire in the field, you might see some damage in the same way that if there's a fire near a barn, that barn might burn. You're right about the height. This is a single access tracking system, so they start out facing east and then they rotate and then face west at sundown. The idea is to maximize energy production, so it's at its tallest tilt you would see about 10 feet. The pollinator species the seeding is planted with the design to grow no larger than about 3.5 or 4 feet.
I've never read a glare analysis before this, so I'm not sure, and maybe this isn't in your wheelhouse either, but looking at the one for the Baldwin Airport, it's on our packet, page 226, in case somebody wishes to follow along, but it talks about a glide slope of 3 degrees, and it says pilot view restricted, yes, and then a little later down it indicates that a certain latitude and longitude, the threshold for height above ground, it says 50 feet, and for 2 miles says 519.32. By contrast, the New Richmond Airport has a threshold at 50 feet and a 2 mile at 605.85, 519 to 605.85. Does that indicate where the pilot would see glare if he was below 50 feet, or where he would cease to see glare? That glare is reflected to the cockpit all the way down to 50 feet at the threshold of the runway, or is it the opposite way around? Or do you not know?
Yes and no. I'll talk about the glare analysis. So it's the Solar Glare Hazard Analysis Tool. They call it SGAT. The tool was developed by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and then it was privatized after a time. So it's the same tool that any large airport would use. From what I can recall from our report, we found no glare risk. The precise details you have before you, I might defer a little bit to Amy, our urbaning specialist, but the panels themselves actually have an anti-glare coating on them purposefully.
Yeah, 50%, I think it said.
Yeah, and the idea is to capture the solar radiation and not reject it with the glare thing. So as far as like what the glare analysis does, typically it's used around airports, and there's I don't know how to describe a three-dimensional picture in words. There's a glide path that upon which you are arriving to an airport, and that's typically what they're checking. That's what the airports are looking for. There are plenty of utility scale solar installations on airport grounds, and they protect against that. They're designed purposely to stay away from those landing strips.
So maybe the way to interpret this is that on the glide path from 2 miles out at 519 feet above ground for the Baldwin, down to the threshold of 50 feet off the ground, no glare is reflected to the cockpit.
That was how I read the report.
Okay, okay. And these things are relatively flat, the sun is relatively steep, so that all makes sense. Yep. Okay, I have no other questions. Anybody else? Is there anything else you want to, I take it that you have looked at this proposed decision and it's acceptable to you if we adopt it this way?
Yes, it is. The only, Mr. Wozniak talked about the decommissioning agreement. The language in the St. Croix County ordinances is something that's acceptable to the county, which is why we came up with the best document we could. We weren't really sure what you wanted to see, so we're happy to work with county staff to make sure that agreement is in place. But we have a decommissioning agreement on every single project we do, so we're not a stranger to it.
All right, does your colleague want to testify too, or get it on your resume that you testified to the St. Croix County, Wisconsin Board of Zoning Adjustment?
I think she's all right.
See,
She has plenty of experience doing this.
okay, you don't need to build your resume. Good. Anything from the board? Mike, you're waving your hand or turning on your?
No, the only thing I would add is I went out to the site and, took some photos, of course. I didn't end up including them in the report, but one thing I would mention that really struck me is the land being in conservation program for 10 years. The water that runs either through that site or off that site, there's a culvert underneath Highway 12, and I kind of parked over there and took a good look at everything. I was really impressed by how clean that water is. That conservation program has really got the job done, and I think that as long as the project is thoughtfully installed, that cover that will be underneath and around will have the same effect, and it's a good thing for our surface water resource. Sometimes we overlook these properties that are being managed well, but it is really getting the job done there, and it's benefiting the water quality that's running off. So hopefully that continues with this transition to the solar use. And the other thing is not that we make our decisions based on this, but the revenue sharing program, the revenue that will come to the county and the town will be pretty good. So that's just a associated benefit from this land use.
The way I read it, there's no reason to expect surface water management to degrade or water quality to degrade, because the amount of impervious surface in this would be no more significant than a field road from all indications. Let me see, I think there's one other person in the room. Did you wish to address us, sir? All right, you've had your opportunity. Anything more, Mr. Unger?
No. I just want to, again, thank staff and thank the board for taking the time to work through the application.
It's good. I enjoyed reading it. I was an engineer before I became a lawyer, and a lot of interesting facts in here. 11:04, I formally declare the hearing closed. Members, are you ready for action? Who wants the honor and glory of making the motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit as outlined by the staff.
I'll second.
Mr. Telejohn, Mr. Peterson, thank you both Further discussion, members, before we vote? All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Unanimously approved. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, staff, anything to talk about for the next meeting?
I've only got a couple of things, Mr. Chair. Steve Smart in the back of the room here will be hopefully confirmed by the county board at their May meeting as one of our alternate members. We're going to be getting an ad out and that to seek our other alternates so that we have a full board of adjustment and 2 alternates. And then at the May meeting, our agenda will include election of the chair and vice chair because we do that every election year after the county board meeting in May. So, okay.
Outstanding. How does the workload shape up?
We're expecting, for the May meeting, we're anticipating, we got a couple items that are a little dependent on getting some information, but we're expecting to have 3 or 4 items on the May meeting agenda for your interest, and kind of a mix of types of issues from contractor yard to a floodplain crossing to a campground, and possibly an agricultural lime processing use. So you may have an interesting meeting, and that, I believe, would be the expected, the normal day of Thursday, May 23rd, is that, Jason?
Correct, Mike.
That's what I
May
see.
23rd.
Yeah,
Yep.
it looks like
Yeah.
it'd be May 23rd, and we'd be back to the 9:15 start.
Do we have it? What's wrong with 8:30?
The room's not available. But can we pick a date now? I see the construction is going on, and when will the clerk of court be able to use her new room in the new building instead of here? So we no longer have a
Yeah, I
conflict.
believe Julie thinks it's September, so, yep.
So starting in September, we'll be able to meet here at 8:30 every time. Good. Oh,
I haven't seen Mr. Witt's reflecting pool out there yet. Are they not gonna put that in?
you guys. Any other business to come before us? Nope. Welcome, Mr. Smart. Hope you're approved. Do you need character witnesses or something when you appear before the county board? Yeah. Okay. Presumably you'll schedule him for training sessions and all that good stuff to.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. We'll be delighted to have you aboard. I'll declare the meeting adjourned at 11:07. Thank you all for being here.